This HOA Karen walked into my locked garage without permission and called the cops on me. Worst mistake of her life. It started as one of those quiet, forgettable afternoons where nothing unusual ever seems to happen. The kind of day where the air feels still. The neighborhood hums softly in the background, and you assume everyone is minding their own business. I had stepped inside the house for barely 10 minutes, just long enough to grab a drink and answer a call, when something felt off. There was a sound that didn't belong, metal shifting. A faint echo. The unmistakable noise of movement where there shouldn't have been any. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe the wind caught something. Maybe a neighbor's car door slammed. But then I noticed it. The garage door was open. That alone was strange. I am careful about locking things. Always have been. I walked closer, and that uneasy feeling in my stomach tightened. Inside my garage, standing among my tools and storage shelves like she had every right to be there, was a woman I had never seen before. She wasn't looking around nervously or acting lost. No hesitation. No confusion. She was calmly walking from one side to the other, peering into corners, snapping photos on her phone, nodding to herself as if she were checking items off a list. For a moment, I just stared, trying to process what I was seeing. My brain searched for a logical explanation. Maybe she was at the wrong house. Maybe there had been some kind of misunderstanding. I cleared my throat and asked, as calmly as possible, what she was doing in my garage. She barely looked up. Instead of apologizing or explaining, she told me she was inspecting the property. Not asking. Not requesting permission. Inspecting. That single word changed the entire tone of the situation. She explained confidently, smugly, that she was part of the HOA and that garages were subject to inspection. According to her, anything that could be seen or potentially seen from the outside fell under HOA oversight. It didn't matter that she hadn't knocked. It didn't matter that she hadn't identified herself. In her mind, my garage was no longer mine. It was community business. I told her she was mistaken. I told her she needed to leave. That's when her expression shifted. The polite mask slipped, replaced by irritation and superiority. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and said homeowners like me were always so defensive. Then she lifted her phone again and began recording me, narrating the situation as if she were the victim, claiming I was being aggressive simply for questioning her presence. That was the moment it fully sank in. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This was entitlement, pure and unapologetic. She genuinely believed she could walk into a private space, uninvited, and face no consequences. Standing there, watching a stranger treat my property like her personal territory, I realized this day was not going to end quietly at all. She straightened her posture as soon as I told her, again, that she needed to leave. It was like flipping a switch. Her shoulders squared, her chin lifted, and suddenly she wasn't just a woman in my garage. She was acting like an authority figure. She said, slowly and clearly, as if explaining something obvious to a child, that she had HOA authority. According to her, that phrase alone should have ended the conversation. In her world, those 3 letters were a universal pass. No permission needed. No boundaries respected. No questions allowed. I asked her to show me some kind of identification. A badge. A notice. A letter. Anything that proved she had the right to be there. She laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not an embarrassed one. But a sharp, dismissive laugh that carried more arrogance than humor. She said she didn't need to show me anything because everyone knows the HOA has the right to inspect violations. She pointed around the garage, listing imaginary problems as she went. Boxes stacked too high. Tools not properly stored. A can of paint that, in her words, was probably against regulations. Each comment felt less like concern and more like a power trip. When I reminded her that she had entered a locked, private space without permission, she waved it off like a minor technicality. She said the door must have been left open, implying that if she could get inside, she was allowed to be there. That logic stunned me. By that standard, any unlocked door was an invitation. I told her very clearly that she was trespassing and that she needed to stop recording me. That's when she turned the camera fully toward her face and raised her voice. She began narrating loudly, making sure anyone nearby could hear. She said she felt threatened. She said I was being hostile. She said she was just doing her job and that I was interfering with HOA duties. The performance was deliberate. Every word was chosen to paint me as the aggressor, even though I hadn't raised my voice or taken a step toward her. She wanted a reaction. She wanted something she could use. Neighbors started peeking through windows. I could feel the situation slipping out of the realm of reason and into something uglier. I told her, one last time, to leave my property. Instead of complying, she stepped further into the garage, opening a cabinet without asking. That single action crossed a line so clear there was no pretending anymore. This wasn't oversight. This wasn't enforcement. This was intrusion. She then threatened to call the police, saying they would educate me on how HOA rules work. She said she'd have me fined, possibly cited, maybe even arrested for obstructing an inspection. The confidence in her voice was chilling. She truly believed the system would automatically side with her, simply because she claimed authority. Standing there, watching her dig herself deeper, I realized something important. She wasn't expecting consequences. People like her never do. And that realization was exactly what gave me clarity. If she wanted to escalate, then fine. But it wasn't going to go the way she thought. At that point, something inside me clicked. There was no anger, no panic, no urge to argue anymore. Just a calm certainty that the situation had gone far enough. She was still talking, still recording, still listing violations, like she was reading from an invisible rulebook. But I had stopped listening. I had already warned her multiple times. I had clearly told her she did not have permission to be there. And she had chosen, again and again, to ignore that. I stepped past her without saying a word and walked toward the garage entrance. She scoffed, assuming I was backing down or going to fetch paperwork to prove my case. As soon as I reached the control panel, I pressed the button. The garage door began to descend slowly, the mechanical hum filling the space. At first, she didn't notice. She was too busy talking into her phone, narrating how she was being harassed by an uncooperative homeowner. Then the sound registered. She spun around, eyes widening as the door continued closing. Her confidence cracked instantly. "What do you think you're redoing?" she shouted, her voice sharp now, no longer smug. I didn't respond. I stepped outside as the door reached the ground and locked it. No shouting, no insults, just a locked door between her and the exit she had taken for granted. The transformation was immediate. The woman who moments ago claimed total authority suddenly sounded panicked. She began pounding on the door, her voice echoing through the metal panels as she yelled that I couldn't do this, that it was illegal, that I was detaining her. She accused me of kidnapping, of false imprisonment, of abuse of power, all while ignoring the simple truth that she had walked into a private, locked space without permission. I stood outside, phone in hand, and calmly called the sheriff. I explained exactly what had happened. A woman had entered my garage without consent, refused to leave when asked, and was now locked inside while law enforcement was on the way. There was no drama in my voice, no exaggeration, just facts. Meanwhile, on the other side of the door, her shouting grew more frantic. She threatened lawsuits. She threatened fines. She threatened to ruin me through the HOA. She demanded I open the door immediately. But now the power dynamic had shifted, and she could feel it. For the first time since she arrived, she wasn't in control. A few minutes later, she announced she was calling the police herself. As if that would scare me. I almost smiled. "Go ahead," I said through the door. "They were already on the way." That was the moment the pounding stopped. Silence followed, thick and heavy. Standing there, waiting, I felt something rare in situations like this. Certainty. I knew I hadn't touched her. I knew I hadn't threatened her. And I knew one more thing she didn't. This wasn't just some random homeowner panicking under pressure. She had walked into a situation she completely misunderstood. And very soon, she was going to learn just how badly she had misjudged it. The sound of sirens cut through the quiet of the neighborhood. growing louder with every second. I could see the tension ripple through the street as a few neighbors stepped outside, drawn by curiosity and flashing lights. When the sheriff's vehicle pulled up, the woman inside my garage immediately started shouting again, her voice echoing through the closed door. She was loud, desperate, and clearly trying to make sure her version of events reached law enforcement first. She yelled about being locked in, about abuse, about a homeowner who had gone rogue. From the outside, it must have sounded dramatic. From my side, it was almost surreal. I raised my hands calmly as the sheriff approached, signaling that there was no threat. I explained the situation clearly and without emotion. A stranger had entered my locked garage without permission, refused to leave when asked multiple times, and continued inspecting and recording inside my private property. I told him she claimed HOA authority but refused to show identification. I also made it clear that I never touched her, never threatened her, and only closed and locked the door after she refused to leave. The sheriff listened carefully, nodding but not reacting. He asked a few clarifying questions, the kind that showed he was already sorting fact from noise. Then he went to the garage door and asked the woman to identify herself. Her tone instantly changed. The confidence was gone, replaced by urgency and panic. She launched into a rapid explanation, repeating the same claims she had made earlier but with a new layer of fear underneath. She insisted she had every right to be there and accused me of trapping her intentionally. The sheriff asked her a simple question. Did she have written authorization to enter the property? There was a pause, a long one. She said the HOA allows inspections and that everyone knows the rules. He followed up by asking if she had provided notice or obtained consent. Another pause. This time, she didn't answer at all. When the door was opened, she stepped out slowly, her posture completely different from before. No phone raised, no attitude, just quiet compliance. The sheriff separated us and asked for documentation. She had none. No badge, no letter, no proof of authority. Meanwhile, I provided identification and calmly answered every question. The contrast was obvious. The sheriff then explained, very clearly, what constituted trespassing and how HOA rules did not override state law. He told her that entering a locked garage without permission was illegal, regardless of her role or intentions. Each word seemed to drain her further. The woman who had arrived convinced she was untouchable now stood silent, staring at the ground. Neighbors watched as the narrative flipped in real time. What she thought would be a public victory had become a public lesson. And as the sheriff turned back toward me, his tone shifted. Respectful, familiar. That was the moment she realized something was very wrong with her assumptions. She stood there in complete silence as the sheriff finished explaining the law. Her earlier confidence nowhere to be found. The transformation was almost unsettling. Just minutes earlier, she had been loud, assertive, and convinced she controlled the situation. Now her shoulders were slumped, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape that didn't exist. The reality had finally caught up to her, and it hit hard. The sheriff didn't need to raise his voice or threaten her. The facts alone were enough. Then came the moment that changed everything. The sheriff turned toward me, addressed me by name, and spoke in a tone that carried familiarity and respect. It wasn't casual, but it wasn't cold either. It was the kind of tone you use when you know someone, when you trust them. I could see it register on her face instantly. Her eyes widened slightly, and the color drained from her cheeks. She had assumed I was just another homeowner she could intimidate, another person who would fold under pressure. She never considered the possibility that I actually knew the law inside and out, or that the person she had called for help might already know exactly who I was. The sheriff made it clear there would be no charges against me. He stated plainly that I acted within my rights and that I had shown restraint throughout the situation. Then he turned back to her and issued a firm warning about trespassing and harassment. No dramatic arrest, no shouting, just consequences delivered calmly and officially. That was worse for her than any spectacle. There was no way to spin it. No way to play the victim anymore. She tried to speak, opening her mouth as if to explain herself. But the words didn't come. Whatever argument she had prepared died on the spot. The authority she thought she carried evaporated completely. The HOA, the inspections, the threats, none of it mattered now. All that remained was the fact that she had crossed a legal boundary and been stopped cold. Before leaving, the sheriff advised her not to return to my property and suggested she take any HOA concerns through proper legal channels. She nodded stiffly, avoiding eye contact with everyone around her. The neighbors, who had been quietly watching from a distance, slowly drifted back to their homes, the unspoken conclusion clear. The story was not what they had expected. She walked away without an apology, but she didn't need to say anything. Her silence said enough. The HOA never contacted me again. No letters, no fines, no inspections. That chapter ended right there in my driveway. As I closed my garage later that evening, I couldn't help but reflect on how quickly power changes when assumptions collapse. She thought she was in control because she believed rules only applied in one direction. What she learned that day was simple. Boundaries matter. The law matters. And entitlement means nothing when it runs into reality. If you enjoy watching entitled people face real consequences, hit subscribe. These stories just keep getting better.